Welcome to today's show. I am your host, Eric Darnley Small. A special Sunday episode of the show because of how much news happened over the week, particularly on Friday. And I wanted to get some time to sort of let everything settle, sort of absorb everything. And I'm glad I did because Saturday there was a lot going on. People may be aware of this. People may know a lot of protests happening. I'm going to talk about that briefly. There's so much. We were just hit with a fire hose of news over the last week, and this weekend it continued. Like and subscribe if you enjoy this video, and if you enjoy this channel, you can click the bell to be notified of new content. And as you guys know, I am going to talk about the news. Links were in the Mastodon, mastodon.vtip.me/@ what you missed, all one word, what you missed. And if you visit my Mastodon, you would have seen everything I'm going to talk about today, because my news comes from that news, from a lot of this stuff, as well as other places, but that news primarily is the jumping off point I have. So the Mastodon is there. This is not a show that I don't do a video 5 days a week as others do. But that Mastodon is regularly getting updated, and you can reach out to the show through that. You can reach out to me directly, Eric D. Small, the same at the Mastodon site, mastodon.vtip.me/@ Eric D. Small. To reach out to me directly, DM me if you need to or whatever. And if I'm missing something, and if you want to clue me in on something, please let me know, and I will post it on my Mastodon as well. But today's episode is the weekend review. What did we learn? What did we learn from the weekend review? A lot of stuff happened, so it's important to come away from this time understanding what just happened. What did we just go through? The market took a crash, or cratered, not an official crash, went into correction territory, bear territory. The NASDAQ went into, and there's a whole calculation for that. I think if you lose certain number of percentage points, and I believe that's what happened with the NASDAQ over the entire, from the beginning of the year or from the beginning of the quarter. That's what determines bear territory. Is the will of the GOP breaking? Some interesting news out of GOP. And when I talk about GOP, I also include right-wing influencers, Donald Trump supporters, conservatives. Are the Dems beginning to find their voice? A lot of news from Democrats. Voters come out in opposition. Is the spell wearing off? Remember, I say we're in a love scam. Donald Trump has scammed this country into a love scam that's now becoming a financial scam. And my final thoughts, Trumpism a scam, racism the plan. This is one show, this is one channel that is going to not shy away from talking about racism, because I think it's extremely important in this time. But first, let's talk a little bit about what happened just before all the big news that has happened. And I want to begin with Friday. Regret from business community and shock as the market tanks. Analysts throw around words like bear market, as I just said, and stock market crash. Cheerleader Jim Cramer on Friday said, if you wanted to make the market crash, I think you would go with this game plan. And Joy Reid's Substack is where I found the link to the Mediaite website. You can see Joy Reid's Substack, the one I'm talking about, on the Mastodon, and she links to that, to this statement, and it was made just as the market opened on Friday and began to tank. And Jim Cramer is an interesting guy because he's a business guy. He's gotten a reputation for being sort of, a notorious reputation from the Great Recession. He was one of the guys who was out there. He did a rant on CNBC at that time. He goes into that in this rant that he went into at the opening bell on Friday. You can take a look. I'm sure there is YouTube videos of it. I'm sure you can find it on CNBC's website maybe. But he later on goes on to Aaron Burnett's show, who used to be, of course, on CNBC years ago, and said he had been fooled by Trump. He says, I feel like a sucker. They screwed it up. I was very let down. He goes on to say other things as well. So when you begin to get business people, CNBC people, Fox business people, folks who are loath to challenge Republicans. They're always willing to go after Democrats. Elizabeth Warren used to go on there, and Becky Quick, who is a CNBC person. They would get into it back and forth. But Republicans have this. I believe it's an illusion that they are better in the economy. And as I said repeatedly, history shows that that's not true. It's just demonstrably not true. That the Republicans are better. This will now be the third Republican administration. I'm not counting Trump twice. I'm saying Bush, the son. I'm starting with Bush the son. So I'm talking about in this century. This is now the it's not three in this century. So, but I'm talking about the two Bushes, H.W. and W. And now Trump. These are the three last Republican presidents. Each time they've gone into office, they've made it worse. The economy has gotten out worse than when they went in. And immediately Democrats fix it, repair it, and make it better. And they lose elections. They don't have the credibility as being better for the market. So these guys were scammed. You don't want to talk about a love scam. That was probably the biggest love scam, is that the president had these people fooled into thinking that he was going to be a cheerleader for the markets and he would do good things. Stephanie Ruhle had a very interesting thing on her show on Friday night, where she said that her sources were talking about how everyone from the Commerce Secretary Lutnick to Besson, the Treasury Secretary, all they could say about Trump is that he likes them. He likes them the best, but he really likes me. That is something. That is something. Love scam. Anyway, going into Saturday, in the middle of the night and after a vote-a-rama, the Senate passed Trump's nasty bill on partisan lines. This is the bill that will both cut and gut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, and will cut taxes for the wealthy so that Elon Musk will have more money. But Democrats are able to get Republicans on the record for cuts to Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security. Also, they got them on the record to, talk glowingly about billionaires and making sure that billionaires are taken care of and that there are no restrictions on them. They also on the record for doing nothing to stop Trump's tariffs. Now it needs to be reconciled with the House bill, but the bill is toxic for Republicans. So that's what leads us off into Saturday, right? This is all happening in the weekend. That's one of the reasons why I wanted to hold off on doing it, because of the vote-a-rama and because I wanted to listen to the fallout of the markets. And let's just talk a little bit about it. As Trump golfs, the market craters. And the irony of all ironies is Donald Trump is golfing with, of all people, the Saudi family. Live Golf is their golf tournament. And, I think it's pretty well known that the 9/11 hijackers all came from Saudi Arabia. And there was a time, particularly after 9/11, that you wouldn't be caught dead anywhere near a Saudi in the Saudi family. Here we are some 25 years later, and I'm sure this year we're going to have a remembrance with a little bell remembering 9/11. And Donald Trump is at the golf course yucking it up with them, and then at a fundraiser later on. But meanwhile, the Dow dropped 2,200 points on Friday, dropped 1679 on Thursday. The first time ever that it has shed more than 1,500 points in back-to-back days. NASDAQ Composite, home to many tech companies that sell to China and manufacture there as well, dropped 5.8% to 15,587. S&P lost 10% in 2 days, down 22% from its December record, a bear market in Wall Street terminology. The bull market is dead, and it was destroyed by ideologues and self-inflicted wounds, said Emily Bowersock Hill, CEO and founding partner of Bowersock Capital Partners. And then the 10-year Treasury yield fell back below 4% Friday as investors flooded into bonds for safety, pushing prices up and rates lower. The CBOE Volatility Index, the VIX, Wall Street's fear gauge, surged above 40, an extreme level seen only during rapid market declines. So these are all the ingredients of a total disaster, of a market that is melting down. Jim Cramer said something about if you go for the fishes on Monday and Tuesday, you will swim on Thursday and Friday. You were swimming with the fishes on Monday. This is after the '87 crash, which I knew nothing about, too young. But apparently that was one of the things he learned coming out of that. So if you tried to buy the dip, which is what a lot of retail investors usually try to do, which is a lot of people will suggest that you do at a time like this, what he says is by Monday, your portfolio was toast. You were swimming with the fishes. Really bad. But this is something fascinating happening on the GOP. There appears to be cracks in the unity. And there are three anecdotal stories that may not mean much of anything in the aggregate amongst a lot of different things. Or it could mean a real serious issue going on in the Republican Party. One was this somewhat minor discharge petition, and it caused friction in the House. And Annapoluna Luna, who is on the left, resigned from the Freedom Caucus after Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is on the right there, attacked her for joining Democrats in the House to change rules allowing proxy voting. Trump supported proxy voting. The Speaker of the House did not. Speaker Johnson adjourned the House as retaliatory measure, but agreed to hold the vote. So what happened is that Democrats, during their times, they created a mechanism for which a pregnant a member of Congress could have somebody, if she couldn't go directly to be in the House, someone could vote for her. And Republicans at that time, who were in the minority, wanted to catch Democrats not having enough votes to push through their agenda. But the proxy voting made it too easy. It's almost like the filibuster, where you can just say, I'm going to filibuster, and they won't hold the filibuster. So they wanted to create an environment now by getting rid of the proxy voting. Republicans did, to force people who were sick, who were having babies, who would have to force them to come in and vote, right? To make it as miserable as possible on them. Well, Luna here, for whatever reason, decided she was going to go her own way. And she was able to corral enough Republicans with all the Democrats to push through a discharge petition. Now, a discharge petition is needed when the Speaker of the House refuses to bring up a bill, right? It's the only way you can get a bill to the House. Apparently, Legally Blonde, we learned this. I never saw Legally Blonde, so I never learned this, but I learned this afterwards because discharge petitions became a thing on the right all during Trump's first term, and now it looks like it's coming again, not on the right, on the left, I should say. Because as soon as Republicans got in power, they tried to ice out anything that Democrats were doing, and the only way to force it through was through this discharge petition. And it is a way to get something forced to the floor if the Speaker refuses to bring it up. So the thing here that I think that is significant is that Luna joined Democrats on anything, and Marjorie Taylor Greene is not for it. Donald Trump, surprisingly, did not disagree with it. Very interesting thing. In the Senate, oh, and by the way, so this thing, it didn't actually go to a vote because Johnson actually shut down Congress, but he has promised to go ahead and bring it up to a vote. But I'm curious to see, Luna has now left the Freedom Caucus, and I am very curious to see how much longer she's going to remain in the House, given that Marjorie Taylor Greene and others now have their knives after her. How much longer is she going to be willing to deal with this? In the Senate, 4 Republican senators joined all Democrats on a bill, and it was a bill by Tim Kaine to end the emergency declaration cited for the tariffs on Canada. And Senator Rand Paul was a co-sponsor of the measure, and Senators Collins, Murkowski, and McConnell of Kentucky, along with Paul, all voted for the resolution, along with all Democrats. So here again, you see enough Republicans to push through something to happen, push through a vote, and joining all Democrats, something that you never saw, particularly in the Senate. You never saw that. Actually, that's not true. You saw it, but it was extremely, extremely rare. But Rand Paul, this stuff with tariffs, finally we're beginning to see the libertarian, this guy, come out, because he is now beginning to speak out. And Donald Trump is not interested in people who have opinions that are different from his. Murkowski has always been the one to go her own way, because I think, well, I know she was a write-in and that's how she got back. I'll be very curious to see if she's going to run again. Maine's Susan Collins, who knows? And the same thing with Mitch McConnell, done more damage to the country than anybody else. Who knows? He's retiring. He's done. Also, as a bit of an aside, on social media, even Ann Coulter and Joe Rogan have expressed issues with Trump's handling of deportations. The deporting of this guy who was a hairdresser and whatnot, a part of a gang, is really, really beginning to trouble some of these social media people who are Trump friendly, but are not so sure about all of what he's about. And then you've got the Dems, who appear to be finding their voice. House Leader Hakeem Jeffries threatens to sue Texas Governor Abbott when Texas House member unexpectedly died. A replacement needed to be found. But the death of the Democrat helps GOP maintain their majority. Texas governor has refused to call an election to keep the Democrats in the minority. Remember, these numbers are very razor thin in the House between Democrats and Republicans. In any chance that Republicans can get to get a few Democrats in, again, this is why this proxy voting is such an issue, because any opportunity that the Republicans can take to keep Democrats from voting works for them, works in their favor. And to have this Abbott refuse to call an election immediately, which I'm assuming Jeffries must think that he's against Texas law if he's threatening to sue, is there to help Republicans keep their agenda flowing and the Trump agenda flowing in case they lose members, right? We already know that New York's House member, who was supposed to be the new UN ambassador, Elise Stefanik, has had to withdraw because the numbers are so thin. And they couldn't afford to have that election run because they're afraid that they would have lost that election. Remember, if you've been watching this channel, I had been saying that there's something going on in New York where I thought that 3 weeks ago, I was saying, I think that there's a good chance that New Jersey and New York could flip to the Republicans. I'm not so sure about that anymore, particularly after this last week. And particularly now after what we're seeing with Doge and what they're doing and with these protests, because they must be getting internal numbers, which of course I wouldn't have. They're getting internal numbers where Stefanik's seat, which is comfortably Republican, could have swung, and I think she won it by 15 points, could have swung it, or maybe a little bit less, could have swung it to the Democrats, which would have been unprecedented, an embarrassment. So they couldn't have her go to the UN. They had to have her stay there. Boo-hoo-hoo for Stefanik. Meanwhile, African-American Senator Cory Booker breaks the segregationist 50-year record for holding the floor. The New Jersey senator talked in opposition to the bill that passed on Saturday. He knew he could not stop the bill, but hoped to shake moderate Republicans. He got a standing ovation, and many believe got a boost in the arm of dispirited Democrats. I don't know yet what to say about that and how much that alone is had any real impact or long-standing impact. But the fact that people are saying is a positive thing. And then I think the real gas in people's tanks is this huge win in Wisconsin. In addition to the House and Senate congressmen and congresswomen, Democratic women made huge moves stateside. So you've got this liberal, quote unquote, liberal judge. That's the way that the media frames her. Liberal judge Susan Crawford won. I talked about that on at least 2 videos, how important that election was. Wisconsin elected a new Supreme Court justice. In an election, Elon Musk handed out checks for voting. The 10-point win was decisive. The GOP candidate conceded and rebuffed the idea of fraud, very different from the last election, as I've discussed in the past. But the GOP candidate really was not having it with this idea of fraud. In addition, Democrat Jill Underly, in the other statewide election, retained her seat as head of public schools, but voter ID, usually a topic supported by Republicans, also won. That was an alteration, a change to the Constitution, also on the ballot. And the other thing I think that is most positive for Democrats, I think what they're looking at most is this idea that Elon Musk and his money lost. And the billionaire became the face of the race. And the win by Susan Crawford became a rebuke of Musk. Remember, Crawford's ads targeted Musk directly. In her speeches, she talked about it. In her winning speech, she talked about she was running against Musk and his money. And it could be a formula for future elections. People may have found the Achilles heel in the Republican Party. It could also raise questions and change an attitude for Republicans who no longer fear Elon Musk and his money. Very important if that is a winning strategy going forward. But there is some interesting side notes here. As far as elections go to Supreme Court, we got some bad news. The Supreme Court on the state level is very important. Why? Voting rights and gerrymandering. Very important to remember this. After Rucho versus Common Cause and Shelby County versus Holder, the U.S. Supreme Court, the High Court, demanding that voting rights cases remain in the states. Like Wisconsin, North Carolina was badly gerrymandered, giving the GOP electoral power in a swing state. They do not want to lose it. But it had a 4-3 liberal Supreme Court which struck down gerrymandered maps. In 2022, the court flipped 5-2 Republican. That Republican court re-gerrymandered the maps. Now in 2024, the Democrat Allison Riggs won a vacant seat by 700 votes. Her Republican opponent sued to have thousands of votes tossed after his loss was confirmed. They did recounts, and the recounts confirmed his loss, so he decided to sue. On Friday, one of his attempts succeeded. Voters must, quote unquote, cure their ballots in 15 days. This includes voters serving in the military and overseas. Rigg wants to appeal to the federal courts, but see the second bulletin point as to why I question whether that's a good idea. But just to sort of, and there's a video, you'll find it on the Mastodon, a link to that video where she speaks to Mark Elias about what is going on here. This woman is an expert on voting rights in America, and as a judge and as a litigator. And this is a woman who, and this is a Republican Party that won because they were able to gerrymander all over the country, and the Supreme Court decided that we're not taking up those cases in federal elections or any elections. That was a gut punch to people who believe in voting rights, and because of that, the Supreme Court has become extremely important. And in Wisconsin and in North Carolina, some of the worst gerrymanderings happened. And in Wisconsin, I think, and in Michigan, they changed the Constitution to push back, to make it, to take the partisan hands away from gerrymandering, from deciding these district lines because it was so badly gerrymandered. But in this case, this is a classic case where a woman has won an election. They, of course, wanted to do, because it was so tight, they wanted to do a hand count of the ballots. Then they wanted to recount the ballots and all this kind of stuff. They did a recount twice. She maintained her position as the leader, as the winner. So that wasn't good enough. So the guy sued. The Republican guy sued. And now this is now really about seeing how many votes he can throw out. They don't know, and she doesn't say if those are Democratic votes or not. She is saying basically that this is wrong, and I think that's the right attitude to have. Apparently, the Republicans must think that they can throw out 65,000 votes, by the way, not a small number, 65,000 votes. If they can get rid of those votes, he'll win, apparently, they think. This is some disturbing stuff. And then finally, I want to do a side note about, leave on a positive note in this area and talk about the stunning rejection of Republican Governor Jeff Landry's. Louisiana voters turned down all 4 of his constitutional amendments. Apparently, this guy is really a piece of work, and I think I talked about what he's doing. I mean, just racist stuff in Louisiana. And it really is just an embarrassment. Laundrie's priority for the election, Amendment 2, would have moved hundreds of millions of dollars in tax revenue from state savings accounts into Louisiana's general fund, where Laundrie and state legislators could spend it more easily. And remember, Republicans are usually want to keep government away from funds, because if you have a Democrat, which they had prior to this guy, this flipped to Republicans, Trump country. This is the Deep South. They flipped to Trump company in the country in the last election. So prior to that, though, you know that prior to the Democrat, when the Republican was there, they pushed through this law, or actually maybe a constitutional amendment, to keep money away from the Democrats, because they know that they'll spend it. So now that they're in power, they want that money back. So, but he failed. He failed in being able to push that through. Amendment 3, which 66% of the voters opposed, would have made it easier to send more minors to jail, adult jail, for longer prison sentences. We know that's a fetish on the right. Throw people in jail. Amendment 1, which failed, unless your name is Donald Trump, of course. Amendment 1, which failed with 65% of voters, would have allowed the formation of a specialty court in Louisiana with jurisdiction outside current parish and judicial districts. Again, this desire to control or to create special laws and special courts for areas which are primarily black or primarily poor is another fetish on the right. Conservatives love this idea of small government until you're a blue city in a red state. Then all of a sudden they've got to have big government. Amendment 4 also failed. 64% of the voters. It would have adjusted the rules for special elections to fill vacancies or new judgeships, primarily in the Louisiana Supreme Court. Again, we're seeing in Louisiana, they tried to do what they're pulling right now in Wisconsin and North Carolina, which is to make it more difficult for the people to have control over the Supreme Court of the states. In Florida, 2 seats won by Republicans swung double digits to Democrats. Very important going forward. That was 2 red states, ruby red states, that are seeing some swings in the Democratic direction. And then on Saturday, over the weekend, this incredible hands-off protest, which was both national and international. Hundreds of protesters, including Americans living abroad, took to the streets across major European cities in a show of defiance against Donald Trump's administration. Protesters rallied in Frankfurt, Berlin, Paris, London, and Lisbon, all in a united show of opposition against Trump's policies. In the U.S., more than 1,200 hands-off demonstrators were planned by more than 150 groups, including civil rights organizations, labor unions, LGBTQ plus advocates, veterans, and elections of activists. The protest sites included the National Mall in Washington, D.C., state capitals, and other locations in all 50 states. Several Democratic heavyweights, including some members of Congress, joined the protest and urged the public not to stand for what they called administration's mismanagement and breaking of constitutional norms. Quote, "This tariff are not only imbecilic, they're illegal, they're unconstitutional, and we're going to turn this around," said Rep. Jamie Raskin. "They would have us believe if we gave them all of control, everything would be okay," he said. But breaking news, they have the control, and look at where we are now. Massive inequality across the country. This is Maxwell Frost saying that. So, my final thoughts. Racism is the plan, Trumpism is a scam. In my last video, I talked about Con Mum, which was about a British chef conned out of hundreds of thousands of dollars by a woman claiming to be his rich mum. Trumpism is Con Mum. I think that's important to remember. Trumpism is a con. And I hear a lot of this statement, even still to this day, by people who have rejected Trump, who say, I believe in Trump. I support what Trump is doing, but not how he's doing it. Jim Cramer even said, I believed in this guy. You know, we've had now and more after Friday, And after the week of people being who voted for Trump, who are thrown out of government, who are seeing their 401ks go down, who are seeing Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid being messed with, they say, you know, I like Trump. I like what he's doing. I agree with what he's doing, but not how he's doing it. But that's an oxymoron. Similar to Chef Hornigold, who said in the movie, and I'm paraphrasing, said something to the effect of, who wouldn't want to spend time with their dying mom? The problem is that all scams are designed to be appealing. But at the end, she's not dying. That's the whole point. She's a con artist. Similarly, Trumpism is a scam. It's an illusion. He is not going after waste, fraud, and abuse. He's going after you. And he's not going to tell you that because you wouldn't like it. So, of course, you like this notion of all of this fraud, waste, fraud, and abuse. And that idea of getting rid of that would make Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid solvent. You like the idea of that. But it's not true. There is no amount of race, fraud, and abuse that would bring the kind of cuts that these Republicans say that they need to create solvency in the system. You're the target. They need to get rid of those programs and block grant them or put them in some way that people can't access that money. Why? Because they want tax cuts and they have to pay for these tax cuts. And for them, the unfortunate thing for them is that they don't want to raise revenue. One of the very interesting things about Donald Trump is he's the first Republican in my lifetime to talk on the revenue side of doing something about Medicare, Medicaid, and Social Security. Normally it's about cuts, and they are doing the cuts, but that's not what Donald Trump is talking about. He's talking about, for the first time in 50 years, raising taxes. The only thing is he won't admit tariffs are a tax. He's hoping and he's relying on people forgetting how bad tariffs were and saying that we'll bring in that revenue, that tax revenue, and that will pay for these programs. First Republican to have ever done that. Republicans hated tariffs until Donald Trump came. Conservatives hated tariffs until Donald Trump came on board. But he has done something that I have never seen. And I mean, this is the diabolical, if not brilliant, nature of the man, is that these people can't defend against this, even though it's a tax increase and it's revenues. And it's very hard for Democrats to go against it because and I certainly believe that the way to fix these problems is with revenue increases, with taxes. You have to start taxing the rich, though. Donald Trump is talking about taxing the rich, but other nations. But what does he really want? In addition to the tariffs and overall corruption, he wants to further the cause of racism. A number of stories. This is again in the Macedon. U.S. Food and Drug Administration has pulled draft guidance from its website requiring companies to test medicines and devices on diverse populations as a purge of diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts in the U.S. agencies. Several Swiss companies announced they are adjusting their language and goals on diversity, equity, and inclusion, not just in the U.S., but also on a global level. The decision comes in response to Trump's executive order, specifically one issued on January 21st on the quote-unquote ending of illegal discrimination and resorting merit-based opportunity. This includes a call to encourage the private sector to end illegal DEI and preferences. Trump's administration's State Department sent a request for companies across the EU to drop DEI measures, requiring them to certify if they don't implement DEI. If you don't agree to sign the document, we would appreciate it if you could provide detailed reasons, which we will forward to our legal teams. That was the note sent to a number of European countries. Now, why in the world would you want to end diversity testing in medicine? Why? Only the racist would be concerned about black people or anyone of color, women, other groups being able to be tested to make sure that medicine works on them as it does on everyone else, works as well as them. Only they would not want to have everyone have the benefits that white people have. It's just so blatant. It's blatant racism. And that's only this week. By doing this, he is emboldening red state racism, and he's also emboldening it internationally as well. I talked about Missouri and the consent decree in the city of Ferguson entered into with the U.S. Justice Department. This is just one example. If you want to know exactly if an administration, a Republican administration, is about furthering the cause of racism, the thing that I always look at is the Justice Department. And in the Justice Department, they have a civil rights division. And that civil rights division is there to safeguard the civil rights of American citizens. And who they put there and what that person does and what they're all about is how you'll know whether a Republican is a racist conservative or is maybe, just your average everyday, Republican who's trying to do what Republicans do. But here, the just incredible racism of the Trump administration, because he puts racists in positions of power, right? He emboldens them. He gives them aid and comfort. And I talked again, I'm not going to go into a whole lot of detail about Missouri. You can find, the consent decree online. You can do it. You can look it up. It stems from the protests in Ferguson after the death of Mike Brown. Justice Department Civil Rights Division, now run by a Trump loyalist who's anti-civil rights. Right? So we know what this administration is about with respect to race. They put an anti-civil rights activist as a part of the Civil Rights Division, so expect that to be shut down soon. Uncovered patterns and practices of abuse. The decree was an attempt to change the abuse by the police department during Trump 1.0. Jeff Sessions as AG, and Jeff Sessions was notorious as a conservative. He was the Alabama senator forever, and racist. Had a reputation of being racist so bad that Coretta Scott King wrote to the president, I can't remember who it was at the time, to not have him as AG, to not nominate him because he wanted to be AG. But of course, Donald Trump had no problems nominating him. That did not work out well for Jeff Sessions. You haven't heard from him since then. Now the State Department has decided to enter the fray. Now the state government, not the State Department, the state government. That means Missouri's government has decided to enter and take over the city police department. Because remember, the local mayor and police departments said that we're not going to move away from what we told the Justice Department we were going to do. We're going to implement these plans. But apparently, if you look at the history of this, a whole lot of different interests came in to block it, including the police union, including local right-wingers. And now the state government of Missouri decided that they've had enough. They're just going to take over the police department. Now, why would you do that? Again, there is an axiom among libertarians, among Republicans, when it comes to states' rights. And it is that, as I said earlier, the government closest to the people governs best. But that's not if you're a blue city in a red state. All of a sudden, the government furthest from the people need to take it over because those folks can't do anything. But as I said anyway, there is good news. The good news is that people are waking up. The scam is breaking. Politicians, analysts, Wall Street captains of industry, in addition to union voters and others, are beginning to wake up and realize Donald Trump is not who he said he was. Even on the right, they're beginning to show signs of concern. I mentioned Trump supporter Joe Rogan and Ann Coulter, but the Daily Wire's Ben Shapiro came out against him on the tariffs. And Barstool Sports' David Portnoy are also calling Trump out. He lost, apparently, he's put online $7 million over the tariffs. The scam victim is beginning to ask questions. This is good. Let's see what lie he will tell next. Remember, the scam artists, the Delvies of the world, the other scam artists of the world, they always have a reason why they were not able to do what they said they were going to do. They made promises. You're going to get that millions. Con mom, you're going to get that millions. It's just COVID is. The banks are shut down. But don't worry, the banks will open up and things will go as planned and your thousands will be placed by millions. Read Donald Trump's Trump social messages. He's out there like the total con artist telling people we're winning. Just the pain is just going to ask a little bit longer. The scam artist is scared to death that people might get cold feet and begin to realize what the scam really is, and they are working overtime to shore their base up and make sure that people remain in the scam until they have no other choice, until they've left completely decimated. And unfortunately, I think that is the path America is on. I don't know if we can come back from these tariffs. They began yesterday, as of this recording, 10% across the board, and then, everywhere else, tariffs as far as the eye can see. How it's going to be implemented, but the real damage is the credibility of the United States. We saw Germany, I think I may have talked about this before, has decided that since World War I and II, where they were the main actor acting out, after World War II, they decided to step away from military and to put more of their money away from the military and towards domestic, because they were done with fighting wars. Now, a couple of weeks ago, they changed their constitution to reverse that for the first time. Europe decided to get away from military and turn it over to America. Why? Because fascism had a way of, taking root and caused major, major damage throughout Europe. Now they're talking about putting more and more money and moving away from America, putting more and more money back into the military. So we're in difficult times, we're in changing times, but there is still some light at the end of the tunnel. These protests over the weekend were excellent, and I just hope that someone can talk some sense into this man as pressure begins to mount. Talk some sense into Congress. Congress has a role here. They could stop this, but they're in the biggest scams of all. Thank you for joining me on today's show, and you'll see me on the next one. Take care, everyone. Hey there, fantastic viewers. Eric Darnley Small here, and I hope you're loving today's episode of What You Missed. You've reached the end of today's show, but don't worry, there's more show coming up. If you're watching this on YouTube, please click the bell so that you'll be notified when more content is available. You can also help the channel by clicking the like and subscribe buttons. It helps the YouTube algorithm find new viewers so that I can keep bringing you all this incredible content you enjoy. But wait, there are more ways to support the show. You can make a contribution through the show's PayPal, which goes a long way in helping produce even better content for you. And consider becoming a part of our growing community by joining our Mastodon site at mastodon.vtip.me/@whatyoumissed for more engaging discussions and exclusive updates. And here's something you won't want to miss. Mark your calendars for our live show streaming on YouTube and stream.vtip.me Monday mornings, 10:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. Your support means the world to me, and together we're making What You Missed the best it can be. Thanks for being a part of my journey.